listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricini, and Alex Hobson.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 159 of Sticks in the Six. Here with Peter and myself, Andrew. It's with solemn hearts we bring you episode 159. Obviously, another Game 7 heartbreak. It's the story that keeps on repeating itself. And what's that song that Taylor Swift has? I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending. Well, once again, to those Swifties out there that might tune into the show, we didn't like the ending on this one either.
Hated it.
It was, man, I think I sat there in silence for about 20 minutes after, just staring at the blank TV screen. That game had me stressed. It had all kinds of emotions. I jumped up when Nylander scored the goal for the Leafs. Some heartbreak when Lindholm scored to tie it. It was one of those epic Game 7s, and really, I mean, we'll get into it a little bit after we do our intros here, but you couldn't have had a better game. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, the off-season talk, Peter, how you doing this week, buddy?
Yeah, we're getting by because of what happened. You know what? It's the same old song and dance with this team. Try to be optimistic every single time going in, but you knew that something was going to happen. You knew that. I mean, there was a whole lot of things to worry about too. There was the whole factor of whether Matthews is going to play. He probably wasn't 100%. Joseph Wall was injured right before the game. Samsonov was starting, and I think Samsonov stood on his head, but I think those two goals kind of weren't the best look on him. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I mean, it's the offseason right now. That's basically the bottom line right now. So we're going to be getting into it. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of work because there's no way you could put the same product out next year. You've already ran it back like so many times. How many times are you going to do it? But I will say this, at least the Leafs made the playoffs. It can't be any worse than what the Jays are going through right now, because I think that's another, problem in itself where I think more changes need to happen there than it is here. Like, obviously, the Maple Leafs need to go through and deal with something. But, man, we were just talking about off the air. I'm like, oh, the Jays are winning. I check it out, and they already blew the lead. So it's like, you know what? It can be worse. It can be worse. So it's just how worse and how, much more pain are we going to suffer and endure with all this?
Yeah, no, it's typical Toronto sports, right? I mean, aside from the few here and there with obviously the Raptors winning a few years back, that was a big win for the city. But it's been a long time. And the Jays back in the early 90s, to be honest, I wasn't even old enough to remember. I was born in 88, so I was 4 or 5. So I wasn't old enough to remember those championship days. We've seen a few great playoff runs for the Jays, but the product they're putting on the field just isn't the same. And likewise with the Leafs, the product that they seem to put forth each and every year sets records in the regular season. Obviously, this season set a record for wins on the road, but can't get it done come playoff time. And arguably 3 of their best games of the playoffs in recent memory were the last 3 games of the first round here with Boston. Obviously they didn't get it done in Game 7. But I want to get right into this. I want to talk about it.
Strip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, because obviously you go into work the next day and you have all the fans of other teams, because the Leafs are the most hated team in the NHL. You have all the Fugazi fans from other teams, criticizing you for being a Leaf fan and losing Game 7. When are you guys going to get used to this first round exit? Well, you know what? We made the playoffs, and 90% of the fans that were chirping were Montreal fans. So I don't want to hear it. I had one guy run up and shake my hand, and I was just like, yeah, fuck off. Like your team's at least garbage for the next 3 years, and we'll see if Marty St. Louis makes it through as the head coach for those next 3 years. There's a lot more problems that Montreal's got to worry about than chirping the Maple Leafs for getting knocked out against a tough Boston team in the first round. But in saying that, you could throw that puck into that corner 100 times the way that Lindholm did. And maybe one time out of those 100 times, is it going to pop out in front of the net the way that it did for Pasternak?
Yeah.
I don't know if the Leaf players thought it was icing. I don't know if they thought it was offside. It did seem like there was a little give up in that defensive moment. We saw Riley, we saw Samsonov even not playing the post though, maybe the way he should have. We saw Marner kind of coasting, Nylander coasting. And you know what? That's not to take away anything from the effort that they put forth. If you were to tell me at the beginning of this series that the Leafs were going to be without Nylander for 4 games, without Matthews for 2 games, and then lose their starting goalie who got them to Game 7 for Game 7, and still go to overtime in Game 7, I would have laughed in your face. So, I mean, am I disappointed? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think the Leafs would have put up a 5-1 win in Game 1 against the Florida Panthers? Probably not. So, I mean, we could have very well been sitting here talking about a Game 1 loss to the Florida Panthers, and it's not time to panic yet. But, we're here talking about a first-round exit, and we're used to it, and something that we've grown accustomed to. And as I mentioned, it's a film we've seen before, and the ending just never sits well for us. But
you talked about, I was just about to say, you talked about it possibly being an icing, possibly being an offside, because Pasta was a little bit quick in there, and I may agree with that too. But it's like Riley just got caught flat-footed. Marner, I mean, obviously it was probably a bad change up Bertuzzi's part, but Marner should have just done a little bit of a shoulder check right there to at least stay on him, tie him up, slow him down just a little bit. And Samsonov didn't really play that puck well. So I think equal parts on that. I know that a lot of people are blaming Mitch Marner for that. A lot of people are blaming Morgan Riley. I think it was like 75-7 or 25-25-25. I don't even think that math adds up. So let's go 33-33-33 across the board right there. Samsonov could have played that better. Riley, I just didn't look right on that play, and Marner just looked oblivious as well. Again, quick shoulder check, and also like playing until the whistle. Don't give up on that play. Don't slow down. Don't do anything. Go after that puck. That's like basically hockey 101. And, to answer your question about, the series, the Game 7, I mean, didn't start off well. Let's be realistic. They fought hard in Games 5 and 6 to push this to Game 7. And I think it all started with that poor effort in Game 4. We talked about the tantrum that Marner had on the bench, throwing his gloves on the ground. Could that have been a turning point? That all in all could have served as one, but it really didn't push them forward because the offense still wasn't clicking. You didn't see Marner take over a shift or take over a moment just like Nylander did, just like Matthews did. Tavares was at least throwing his weight around. Morgan Riley, I don't know exactly what was going on with Riley, but he did not look himself. He did not look like the Riley that was dominant last season in the postseason against Tampa Bay and still put forth that effort in against the Florida Panthers. I really don't know what happened there, but you know what? They had the effort and they showed that they could play that physical shutdown style of hockey, but it came at a cost where the offense wasn't clicking, and that was their only way to win. When you only muster up 2 goals against every single game or less than 3 on Jeremy Swayman, I mean, kudos to Swayman. He was absolutely fantastic, but knowing the offense and the firepower that this team has, 2 goals throughout the whole entire series and averaging 1.71 goals per game is just absolutely unacceptable. You need more from your top guys, even from the depth guys too. You need more from them. I'm glad Matthew Knies took a big step forward. I'm glad he's feeling positive and, confident about his play. Yeah. Confident about his play heading into next season because he's going to be in a top 6 role for sure next season. Depending on what happens with Domi and Burt. But I think that you would think that with what Treliving and Shanahan saw with Knies, he's going to be one of your top 6 guys next year because he was absolutely a monster in that series. Again, it just wasn't good enough. You can look to like specific points and say how they tried, how they found that heart or that instinct to try and win a game. Yeah, they did, but it was also too little too late, because game 1 was absolutely atrocious where the penalty kill was awful. Then game 2, when it was tied, and then they just, mistake after mistake that led to them losing hold of that game. And then game 4, we all know what happened there. It was just absolutely garbage. Yeah, there are a lot of good points, but I think a lot of the negatives still outweighed that because it was another first round series loss. And now you're talking about, changes going on again. And I again talked off the top of the show. You can't come back with the same core. You cannot run it back again. Even if you won the series and you still lost to Florida in 5, you cannot run it back. Like that's just the reality of it.
No, 100%. And yeah, I think you mentioned Burt and Domi. I think those are two guys that you got to make a priority this offseason. There was just a stat by Sportsnet stats that came out. Benoit still sits fourth with hits and block shots combined right now in the NHL playoffs. So, I mean, glad that they re-signed him. He's a guy that I think was a force for this team and part of the reason why they could play a little bit more loose on the front end. But at the same time, like they got to figure out what's going on here, because there was the Nylander migraines, there was the illness to Matthews, and is Wall a guy that you can put out there for, let's say, 50 games next season and then have him run in playoffs and be your starter? I don't know. I think he has a history of injuries now, and it's starting to pile up. And I don't want to take that away from Joseph Wall either, because he had an incredible start to the year. He had a little bump in the road on with the injury front, and then obviously in playoffs he came out and he played really strong as well. So I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he still deserves an opportunity. It'll be interesting to see what the Leafs do goaltending wise. Sammy's a free agent. Martin Jones is a free agent. And obviously Matt Murray is a free agent. So right now the Leafs are looking at Joseph Wall, and we've talked about this a number of times over the last few months. They've got Dennis Hildeby, who played incredibly for the Marlies this year. They've got Artur Akhtiamov. I believe he's still under contract for next season overseas, so he's not likely to come over yet. But he's a guy that you have to think about when you talk about the future of goaltending for the Maple Leafs right now as well. And then obviously Vyacheslav Peksa as well, who was playing over in Newfoundland before the team folded. So the Leafs do have some goaltending prospects. They have some very intriguing goaltending prospects. At the same time, this core does not have that much more time in terms of being in their prime together. I think you need to get a goalie now. You need to get an experienced goaltender, and maybe you go out and make that move and lock down a big time name, like maybe, I don't know, a Connor Hellebuck if he's willing to leave Winnipeg as well. So that's a question mark for me. But when it comes to the Game 7, when it comes to this first round, let's face it, the Leafs dug themselves a hole. The Leafs dug themselves a hole right off the hop. Obviously, the Nylander absence was a pain in the ass. Everyone was questioning it. Nobody knew what was going on. Everyone's talking about playing through injuries and this is what you do come playoff time, but we don't know. Apparently he couldn't even really see with his migraines. Then obviously the sickness that I don't know if you saw Matthew's face in Game 7, but he looked like an absolute fucking dog. Like he wasn't
100%, and he was still fighting hard. He did whatever he did to get in there.
If you were Sheldon Keefe, if you were Brendan Shanahan in that instance, would you have kept him out? Game 7?
That's a tough one. I mean, honestly, it basically came at one point you want to look out for the player's well-being, but you got to give him credit that if he wanted to go out there and you weren't going to stop him, you probably weren't going to stop him. Because you'd already missed 2 elimination games. Yeah, they won, but how much more important would it have been if, he was in there? And despite him being not 100%, I thought he still played really, really well. Imagine if he wasn't playing and he didn't set up Nylander on that goal. It probably would have been 1-0 Boston, and Toronto would have lost in regulation. Yeah. It's tough because you don't want to hold out your star player for that long, but if he was healthy and willing to do it, I mean, he was practicing with the team, so obviously he was okay and he got the clearance to do so. But you could tell that he still wasn't 100%, but he still gave it his all. Like that takes absolute guts right there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I understand the intrigue for him to get back in the lineup. At the same time, you won the last 2 elimination games. I think at this point it's a catch-22. It's Matthews doesn't play. You get it from Leafs Nation saying, where the hell was Austin Matthews for these last 3 elimination games? Austin Matthews plays and they lose, and all of a sudden you're us talking about, would you have sat Austin Matthews in Game 7 of a series against the Boston Bruins? I don't think this was a winning situation for them in terms of like either way they made the call. I don't think it changes, the outcome of the reaction from Leafs Nation. But yeah, I mean, there was a ton of storylines in this series, man. Like there was so much going on. Marchand skating by after he scored his goal in what was it, Game 3, saying this is over in 5. The bickering on the bench for the Maple Leafs, and that's something that we talked about and how important that might have been in turning things around, and building the core. And we're gonna get into the core and some of the comments made, post game or post series, I guess I should say, in a little bit here. But in terms of running it back, I mean, you mentioned off the top here that they've done it too many times, and maybe it's time for a major change. And a lot of the conversation right now has been centered around Marner, his inability to kind of stand out in these series, that the Maple Leafs lose. And credit to him, like if you look at his point percentage in games in the playoffs, like it's not horrible. It's also not an $11 million guy. And I think that's the biggest thing. I saw Paul Bissonnette posted a tweet that said, have Marner look at Gensel as what an $11 million guy looks like in the playoffs. Same size, Gensel's getting it done basically. Your thoughts on Mitch Marner this series? And obviously this core, they all have no trade clauses, so they're not going anywhere unless they're okay with it. And even if they do, you're not getting full value. So what do the Leafs do when it comes to, not necessarily running it back, but trying to make a major change? You're going to have to approach one of these guys and say, we need you to we need you to waive your no trade clause.
Yeah, I'm going to try and work that in reverse order. So players that aren't going to waive their no trade clause are Matthews and Nylander. I mean, those are the only 2 guys that showed up, despite neither of them probably being healthy or 100%. Again, you talked about Nylander with the migraines, Matthews, whatever was ailing him.
Sorry to interrupt, but those are the 2 guys you're not going to ask anyways, because Nylander's a 40-goal scorer who showed up in the playoffs. Matthews is a 69-goal scorer who, let's be honest, in the regular season carried the Leafs in a number of games.
Yeah, absolutely. So those 2 you're not asking them to waive. Could you ask John Tavares? You could, but I don't think he's going anywhere. The dude came to Toronto to basically start his family and be closer to home and be that hometown kind of guy. He's not going to waive it. Again, his family's here. You're not going to ask him to waive or take a discount because, you're going to ask him to take a discount. You're not going to ask him to waive it because it is what it is. I think when he becomes a UFA, I think there are going to be teams that still line up for him because he can still be a decent middle 6 acquisition. I mean, he showed it. I just think that he needs to take way less than what he's already making. So like if you do a Ryan O'Reilly contract, I think that's going to work well for Tavares and for the team where he's still in Toronto, he's still here, but it's a little bit less and it's a little bit more reasonable of what he's going to make. Because we all knew that kind of production that towards the end of this contract was bound to happen. But just being under a point per game, still pretty good. Not $11 million good, but still pretty good. Then you go to Mitch Marner. And based on his play against Florida last year, against Boston this year, he can't handle the physicality, or he can't understand the fact that he needs to level up his intensity and play with that kind of like dog in him in order to be successful. He can't be doing all those like nice fancy plays, taking the patience or being too patient with the puck too much of the time. Because there's so many times where he's looking, he's just having the puck, but he's not driving to the middle of the net. He's not creating something. He's being patient and waiting for something to happen. He's not dictating the play or creating something on his own. That to me is a problem where he did not have that ability to take charge. And one of the main things was he's going and skating for a loose puck, and then he, avoids it by going around Charlie McAvoy, giving McAvoy, possession of the puck easily. Mm-hmm. Anybody else would have probably gone in there, tied the stick up, done something to try and regain possession. Because Marner could have battled that, and he could have had that inside edge where if he just changed his body, lifted the stick, he could have gone the other way for a shot. Didn't. I hate to say this because of how good of a player Mitch Marner is. We've seen it. But when the intensity or physicality goes up, or when that type of game is, in facing him head on, he falters under pressure. I just don't see it every single time. At least Matthews builds up the intensity. We've seen Nylander lay a big hit every now and then. Not as overly physical, but man, he does get that body position and he can throw his weight around when he can. Mm-hmm. I just think that if you got to move somebody, it's got to be Marner because you already have two proven playoff performers. Again, short, series, games, what have you. Nylander and Matthews have been there. And even in the bubble, I think that year when they played Montreal, Nylander was their best forward. Matthews and Marner were invisible, and Nylander took that big step forward. Mm-hmm. So it's just very concerning to me because you see players like Braden Point, you see players like Jake Gensel, smaller players, but still play with that intensity and that drive. You have yet to see that from Mitch Marner when it matters most. And unfortunately, come playoff time, you can't have guys backing away from plays. I know everyone's going to go to the Nylander one last year or whatever, where he holds up and avoids contact, but at least he produces. There's that. Even this series, Marner played in 7 games and only had 3 points. He was the only, him and Tavares were the only one, and they only combined for 5. But I give JT credit for being a little bit more physical. I just don't see that with Marner in his game right now. And if you're able to move on from him right now, even if you were to lose a trade with the return, because it may not be full value, but if you could still get a really decent top 4 defender, picks, a middle 6 or bottom 6 type of energy type forward, so be it, because then you could use that money to rebuild your defense and allocate that money around and spread the wealth around as well, because 4 players making $40 million, it's not cutting it out. And I think Marner has to be the one to fall because of his performance. It's just basically simple as that.
What was the quote from, I believe it was 2 or 3 seasons ago that Mitch Marner said at the beginning of the year, I want to shoot more. I want to shoot more.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the play in Game 7. Great setup to Joel Edmondson off to the side, but he'd worked himself into the high slot past 2 defenders and passed it outside of the slot to the hash marks when Joel Edmondson was waiting. Mm-hmm. Who has a better chance? And this is not a knock on Joel Edmondson. I would bring Joel Edmondson back in a Maple Leafs uniform in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely.
Who's got a better shot at scoring that goal, though? The guy standing off the hash marks, the defenseman who's not offensively sound, or the offensive possession player that you've paid $11 million for, who just worked himself into the high slot? Yeah. Those are the plays that I think are so frustrating to people. And this goes back to the debate that, I posted on our TikTok with, Matthews at 69 goals versus, McDavid at 100 assists. What's more important? And it seems to be a full split. Like it seems to be, some like the goals, some like the assists. The goals.
There's an argument on both sides.
The assists wouldn't happen without the goals, right? So I mean, there's arguments on both sides. These are the stats, and this is what's it's gonna come down to when it comes to playoffs. Mitch Marner is 12th all time on the Maple Leafs with 50 points in 57 games, 11 of which are goals. Okay. Matthews is 14th with 48 points in 55 games, 23 of which are goals. So almost averaging a goal every other game. William Nylander is in 17th with 43 points in 54 games, Again, 20 goals, almost averaging a goal every 2 games. So it comes down to that debate again, which is more important. And if you ask me, the way that it seems right now, the way that the Leafs have played over the last number of years in the playoffs, not being able to get past that 2 goal mark per game, to me, goals are incredibly important. That's what's going to get you over the top. The playoffs are so much tighter when you're being, in the way that they're checked, in the way that they're called. It's just a different, more complex game. The possession is great. It's great to have the possession of the puck, but you need to play with the lead. Going into Game 7, I think the Leafs had the lead for 22 minutes out of the entire series. You are not going to win games. You are not going to win series. You are not going to win Stanley Cups when you have the lead for 22 minutes of a series.
Yeah. Yeah.
That to me is just it's just mind-boggling to think about. And that's why I think it comes down to Marner being the odd man out. Again, we're sitting here speculating at the fact that, Marner's willing to trade his no trade clause or move his no trade clause at some point, and get shipped off to a team. It might not even happen. And the Leafs will be forced to run it back with the same core, which is not a terrible thing, but it's pretty damn obvious that you're not going to get it done. So
the only way it works out is if Mitch Marner actually finds that dog in him. Because not to draw comparisons to Easton Cowan, but you look at the way that Easton Cowan is taking dominance as, a much younger player in the OHL playoffs. He's stepping it up for the London Knights. Mitch Marner was a former London Knight.
That was Mitch Marner when he played for London. And that's the part I don't understand.
Where did it go?
Dog when you're playing for Dale Hunter. You had to be a dog when you played for Dale Hunter.
Otherwise, you wouldn't get the minutes.
You wouldn't get the minutes. You were on a line with Christian Dvorak and Matthew Tkachuk, and you were forced into a position where, maybe those two could have stood up for you a little bit more. Maybe that's why you had a little bit more room to move. But you're an $11 million NHL player. You got to figure this shit out because you've been a detriment to the team. And I'm not trying to bring up like this whole debate of hockey culture and tough guy mentality and all this shit, but when you're a guy and you've got your two teammates grinding you down because you had a misplay or you made a bad call on the ice, and you throw your glove down, or you come back from an injury and you say, I've been reading all the stories that you guys need to stop talking about my injury. Man, you're in the public fucking eye, dude. You're in the mecca of hockey. You're in Toronto. Yeah. If you're not set for that market, it's time to go, right? Like this is a market that cares and idolizes their players. They put them on this fucking pedestal.
Well, you heard his comment about him being like Maple Leaf players being like gods, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why not actually I was just about to say, it. Why aren't you showing it?
And you're getting people going out there and spending their hard-earned money, $800 a ticket to sit lower bowl and watch you fuck the dog in the playoffs. I'm sorry, but there was moments in that series where Marner had zero fucking effort.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could tell me all you want that, I want to be here. I love this city. This is my home. I grew up watching this team. That's great.
That's
great.
That's all we want is just to see it. And I'm just going to throw something out there too. Marner has 50 points. Like since 2016-17, Marner has 50 points in 57 games. Leads the team in scoring. Great. But when you look at the breakdown of each season, it's a little bit concerning because he had 14 and 13 last year. Decent. 14 and 11 last year. Decent. 8 and 7 the year before. But in those bubble years, he was basically invisible. 4 and 7, 4 and 5, no goals. 3 and 7 the year before, and 3 and 7 this past season. So you have 2 good seasons, 2 good playoffs where you actually kind of took control, but the rest are kind of like average.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is concerning. And you can break down the 50 points. You can look at it and remind yourself that 1 year Matthews had a wrist injury, still came out and performed. Nylander missed time, still came out and performed. Nylander missed the first 4 games of this series, still came out and had more points than Marner had this series in the few games that he played.
Yeah.
Had goals in this series, and Yeah, he leads the team since 2016, but that means absolutely nothing when you haven't made it past the first round.
Yeah. Oh, for
So
sure.
that's the conversation. I think that's stirring this discussion around Marner being the odd man out. There's a lot of love for Nylander. He just signed this contract, probably lower than what he could have got on the open market. I'm not saying it's a hometown discount. It's not. I'm saying he signed it for lower than what he could have on the open market. You
But
got
he
Matthews.
played. I was just about to say he played for that contract.
Yep.
I did
He's
not see.
and he still came out this year and put up 40 goals.
There you go. There you go. He back to the last 3 seasons. It looked like Nylander was proving his worth to earn a new contract. When it matters most, even at points this season, I did not feel that Mitch Marner earned a contract that could match that of William Nylander. I think he may have decreased his value because, let's face it, the negotiations for Marner's deal kind of went haywire. Like, nobody liked it. We all saw the warning signs of what could have happened, and this is the result of that. Do not think he's worth more than what he is right now. In fact, I think he's a little bit less.
I think the thing you have to look at too is over the years, Nylander has progressed. He's developed into I would say a star player in this league. Let's be honest. Up until late in the season, he was a top 10 point getter in the league. Marner, he's almost taken a step back.
Mm-hmm.
He has his good game. There's inconsistencies in his game, and I think that's, we can talk all we want about, his point streaks that he's had over his career and whatnot, but like there's inconsistencies, and it's very reminiscent. I'm not saying he's anything like Phil Kessel, but it's very reminiscent of Phil Kessel, where you had streaks where Phil, you knew he was coming down the wing and he was going to score, like on that sick wrister that he'd do from the sideboards. You just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
There's moments where Mitch is going to make a certain pass and you can see it before it even happens because he's on his game. But then there's games where he's off his game and you're like, he's going to, Phil Kessel's going to shoot it wide. It's going to bounce off the boards. It's going to go back the other way and the other team's going to score.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that with Mitch. He's going to try and stick handle it through seven defenders, even though there's only 5 on the ice. And he's going to lose the puck. It's going to go back the other way.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing right now. And that's the problem, is there's inconsistencies. I want to jump back to the shots for a second here too. He had 158 shots this season. His shooting percentage was 16.5. Okay. So that's the highest shooting percentage of his career. It's also the lowest shot total since 2020, 2021.
So that's not sustainable.
So, I mean, but even if it was, if you're shooting at 16.5% on 158 shots, why didn't you take 200 shots?
Yeah.
Why didn't you take 250 shots?
Why aren't you feeling confident about that?
There's no reason why Mitch Marner shouldn't have been a 30-goal scorer this year. There's no reason. He finished at 26 goals, 85 points. He's never reached the 100-point plateau. Yes, he only played 69 games this year, so I will give him that. But you're paying a guy who cannot hit the 100-point plateau $11 million to what? Assist on goals and possess the puck? Because he sure as hell doesn't hit.
Like, even you look at some of the best playmakers out there right now, they still know how to rip the puck. Like I don't know what to categorize Connor McDavid, because, and I'm not comparing Mitch Marner to Connor McDavid, but you see McDavid play. He's a good combination of sniper, playmaker, everything like that. Probably not a good example, but you look at other playmakers in this league. Think maybe Nathan McKinnon would have like more assists than goals, but then again, the season he absolutely popped off. But you look at all the top players that can have that balance of playmaking and goal scoring. They are a dual threat. When I see Mitch Marner, I'm just like, what's going to happen. That's why there's always all this coverage on him, because you're thinking pass. He ain't going to shoot, and that's the problem right there. Everyone else has adapted or added that goal scoring element to his game, and like you said, I remember that quote years ago because I've actually wrote about it, how he needs to try and shoot more. Even when this is like 2-3 years down the line and he still hasn't learned to be a consistent shooter. That to me is a problem. And if you're not going to adapt and change the way you play, you can't be consistent in your game every single season. You got to change. You got to improve. And so far, he hasn't even done that yet.
But why did Nathan MacKinnon pop off this year? Because last year they had a shit run.
Yeah.
And he wanted better. He wanted more, and he's a fucking dog. Right?
He is.
He's a dog.
He is.
And that's why Nathan MacKinnon went off for 130 whatever points, because he is a dog, and he knew that the Colorado Avalanche did not live up to expectations last year, even though they missed their captain, even though they had issues with Valerie Nichushkin, even though they had so many.
They won the cup the year before.
They won the cup before. He was not happy with the outcome of the year. When have you seen Mitch Marner come out and possess that dog-like mentality because his team lost in the first round of the fucking playoffs?
Never. And you know what's funny is all these players get off to hot starts. He has been a very slow starter. You look at everything. He has been, and I remember years ago when he was like barely a 0.5 point per game player. Then he started to pick it up, and I'm like, okay, that's great. But why? Again, it goes back to consistency. Why aren't you doing this every night and showing that you want to be one of those top players in the league? Again, like the way that Nathan MacKinnon just popped out this year, absolutely phenomenal. I'm not even going to throw Nikita Kucherov into the mix too, because he was basically
Still
carrying.
Hate that guy.
I totally get it, but he was at the forefront of the Lightning, and I think that the debate for like Hart Trophy, whatever, but he took control of shifts. He was dynamic. MacKinnon took control of shifts. He's being dynamic. McDavid, same thing. It's like, how many times is he going to have to learn that he can't just be one-dimensional right now? The league adapts every year.
Yeah. At $11 million, when you're an $11 million guy, not putting up 30 goals, not putting up 100 points, yes, you're playing the PK. You should be up for the Selke Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
You should be top 5 at least for the Selke Trophy, because $11 million, you're not getting 30 goals. That's telling me you're doing something else right. Who's up for the Selke Trophy this year?
Someone by the name of Austin Matthews.
So tell me again. We can have this conversation we could sit here for hours and have this conversation. But tell me again why Mitch Marner should not be the odd man out, along with maybe Sheldon Keefe.
That's really tough. There's so many arguments for him to not be the odd man out. I'm trying to think, like, again, maybe because of the fact that he has shown that he can be up for awards in the regular season. But, we've heard Matthews talk about like how he's getting all these accolades and nominations, and it's just like, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. You play to win the Stanley Cup. And if individual accolades are not necessarily, I'm not trying to say that it's important for Mitch Marner, but it's like, you know what? I'm trying to find a good reason for that.
Give me something, right?
Yeah. It's really tough to do. I'm not going to lie.
And like, it's worth noting too that after next season, Mitch Marner is a free agent. We can all remember the negotiations that went on with Mitch Marner for this current contract. The suggestion or the hypotheticals that his dad was very involved in the conversations in whether or not he should sign. That has to push people to wonder if it's worth holding on to this guy. Mm-hmm. Or is it going to be a Matt Sundin issue where, he gets to the end of his contract, doesn't waive his no trade clause, and you get fuck all for this guy?
That's the thing. I think I may have found one for reason why to not let him go. So I'm just looking back right now. He's been in top 30 for Lady Byng awards, and only last season was the first time that he was in the top 3 for Selke voting. Everything else is like 16, 10, 33, 14. So one Selke nomination or one major nomination for an award, and that was last year. The one reason why I think you can hold on to him is maybe he does find that inner, killer instinct, dog, whatever you want to call it, in him. And he pops off and he actually plays a little bit, not necessarily aggressive, but he's not afraid of going into contact. He's not afraid of backing away from plays. He's taking more chances and being more of a shooter instead of just looking for Austin Matthews every single time. If he's able to do that coming in the next season, I think maybe you have hope for it, but I'm still not going to give him that contract. That's the only reason why I think you keep him, is if he can develop and overcome everything that's happened. Mm-hmm. But, again, you hate to play scapegoat. Even like I'm pulling a page from Austin Matthews. You hate to play scapegoat with somebody, but it's just when you see Marner play, it's just not good enough at this point.
I'll give you this. Here's one reason why I don't want them to trade him. See that jersey up in the corner there?
Yeah.
Jersey right here? That's one reason why they shouldn't trade him. But
dedication.
I'm in London. I got a lot of love for this kid. This kid. I watched him play for the Knights. He was fucking unbelievable. That said, like, they need a change, and I don't know if getting rid of Sheldon Keefe and Brendan Shanahan is the way to do it. I don't know if that's the I think both of them go. I really do see both of them going, but I don't think that's the only out. And I think you need to make a bigger change. I think if you can have Bertuzzi and Domi on, let's say, 3-year contracts for, let's say, $4 million each, that's $8 million. You give up Marner's $11 million. You're still saving $3 million. This team looks a lot different. A lot different. You got Pontus Holmberg, who's popping off. He plays a torrid game. I think you got to give Robertson an opportunity to get more minutes next year, because, excuse me, at 5-on-5, he was one of the top scorers at 5-on-5 per minutes played. I just, I think there's a lot of things that need to change on this team, and I don't know if they can do it with so much cap invested into those 5 players. It's a big question mark. But before we get on to the next topic here, big shout out to Bubba Double B.
How's it going,
Double
Bubba?
B, baby. Thanks for tuning in, my friend. Always a pleasure to have you tune into the show. I think that's got to be the biggest question mark of the offseason is where we're going to see, or what big changes we're going to see. That said, you had a note here on Elliot Friedman's 32 thoughts, options on what to do with Marner. I think we kind of touched on most of that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that conversation.
Just, if you can free him up, I know we already talked about like the possibility whether to keep him or not keep him. He holds the cards for his no move clause because he has all the power right now. Unless, again, he mentions that a lot of people are mentioning this too right now. If Treliving goes to him and say, we're not going to renew you or sign you next season, I think that basically ends it, because that 8th year is going to be important no matter what for anybody. So I think that is the only way you could try and move him. But if you do move on from him, just think of what you could do to actually rebuild that defense and actually get defenders that can play responsibly within your own end and offensively, and not just have to worry about one specific player types. Recently came out with something right now where you could possibly look at Brandon Montour if he hits the market and Florida doesn't re-sign him. You can look at Brett Pesce, who is a solid 2-way force for Carolina.
Roy,
I was just about to give you a really nice shout out in my piece because of that Matt Roy trade target list that you had in before the deadline. You look at Matt Roy's numbers, like on the surface, his 20 points doesn't look or scream out that much, but he could be another Jake McCabe factor. Yep. Physical, strong, 2-way, chip in offensively every now and then. Man, I even looked at, I gave a breakdown of his numbers against elite level competition. He can be a factor. This is a guy that can shut it down, but also possibly chip in. I don't think LA is able to resign him because they got to worry about other factors, but I think he's definitely a name that you could look at right now. And the love seems to be growing online for Matt Roy right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really have to consider what McCabe gave you this season. McCabe, arguably, outside of Riley being your puck mover,
they are looking at extending him, so I hope that happens.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that too. But McCabe was easily your number one this playoffs.
Yeah.
He did everything that you needed him to do. He even scored. He had great moments. He was physical. He was in their face. He was a fucking warrior. Like
He
this
got
guy.
high praise from Brad Marchand too.
Yes, yes. Like this guy,
So
I remember when he was in Buffalo, and I couldn't stand this guy. I couldn't stand this guy. But like having him on the team now, it's he plays a hard nosed game. He's an absolute warrior. Sacrificed his body. Yeah, his face just showed it all late in the season and into the playoffs. He was just an absolute goon. But yeah, no, it's they have to have that type of player to make anything happen in the playoffs. And I think that's so important. Um, Before we kind of close it out here, I want to talk about some of the exit interviews that we've seen thus far. Obviously, the Leafs pushed their management team to Thursday/Friday. I was just reading that there's some suggestions made that the reason for that is the NHL didn't want too much news coming out on draft lottery day, which we should mention San Jose gets the first overall pick. Likely
congrats,
going to
San Jose.
Macklin. Yeah, Macklin Celebrini. Interesting. If you're a conspiracy nut, you'll like this one. Celebrini's father, I believe, works for the Golden State
Warriors. I think he's like part of like their medical staff or like physiotherapists.
So kind of nice that he's heading down to San Jose, closer to Pops. So that's an interesting little conspiracy tidbit I'll throw at you, conspiracy nuts.
Vice President of Player Health and Performance for the Warriors.
There you go. So
there you go. That's his exact job title right there. Yeah. Love that connection though.
Yes. Chicago obviously getting the second overall pick. And, if you want to check out the rest of what happened from the draft lottery, you can check that out as well. But they said they didn't want a lot of news to kind of take that over. Obviously, they had to talk about Travis Green getting hired as the Ottawa Senators coach. They need to get a coach in there. So that was announced. Also, Sheldon Keefe, I believe, was inducted in, was it the
Brampton, I think.
Brampton Sports Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and obviously the Leafs were there's some etiquette there in terms of not wanting to, kind of announce anything around Keefe's future with the team on a night where they're trying to celebrate his accomplishments either. So there is a lot of talk about Craig Berube possibly being a candidate for a Leafs coaching job if in fact the Sheldon Keefe is out. But we got to talk about these exit interviews. What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways? What do you see from what the team had to offer?
So you hear what Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Keefe all said. Basically the same thing every single year. Optimistic, belief in the core, belief in everybody else. And that's great. But I think there comes a point right now where you can't always go to that as your answer. And that to me was a little bit disappointing, but I'm not disappointed in Morgan Riley because he was the only one that kind of drifted away from the status quo. And I think he gave a really good reflection of what the team needs to do, because I'm just going to read off his comment from Mark Masters here, reading off from TSN on his recap from everything. The belief is there that it's attainable, but there's work and improvement that has to take place. So how close are we? I don't know. We'll see. It feels both attainable and a ways away. And that's what drives you as an individual. That's what drives a team forward to either have success or we'll see. That is probably the most honest answer I have heard from any Leaf player in the last 6, 7, 8 years. He knows that this is not enough. We've seen him deal through disappointment. I know he wasn't on that 2013 team that lost to Boston 4-1. He was still part of the organization because he was with the Marlies then. He has gone through a rebuild. He has seen the disappointment. I think that he was the only one that gave a really good response as a result of that, because he knows that, yeah, we should have that faith, but there's also work that needs to be done. And that's where someone like Mitch Marner comes in. The work needs to be put in because this can't happen every single time. And he even said that, I'm trying to find it here. I think I may have lost it, but he wants to, like, basically the end goal is to win the Stanley Cup. And he's felt this pretty much more than any other year, recapping everything. It's interesting that he was able to be that honest about the situation. So good on him for going a different direction, because he's saying what a lot of Leaf fans have been saying and what needed to be said, because it seems like he's on their side as well right now.
Yeah. I think the one that stood out for me, and I liked what Riley had to say, but the one that stood out for me was Nylander, when he said, "Look, I don't think there's an issue with the core. I think we were fucking right there all series and battled hard, got to game 7 and OT." And the reason that stands out for me is, one, it reminds you that we just talked about Marner and how he's not built for the Toronto market. Nylander is built for this Toronto market.
Yeah.
He's not backing down. We see the
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. And that's I think what we need to see from more of the players. Nylander, as much as people think that he's soft and pulls away, he's a fucking dog. He is a dog. He came back after his migraines and not being able to see, and came out and played maybe some of the best hockey of his career in terms of playoff performances, and single-handedly got them to a game 7.
Yeah.
So that one stuck out to me. Do I agree with him on not having something wrong with the core? Not necessarily. I think there needs to be some changes, or they need to have that Nathan McKinnon mentality where they're going to come out and they're going to be dogs next season. But they need to start not giving a shit, and they need to start putting that on the ice and putting together a good product that is gonna take that next step. Because how many years can you say we were right there and we're ready to take the next step?
You said that last year.
It's starting to get old.
Because even though you lost the 5 games, you kind of said that last year. You kind of said that the year before.
Yeah.
Again, there's so many times that you could give a team a chance. I think they've run out of chances. You just can't at this point.
No, absolutely. Before we close it out, a little prospect talk here. Obviously, you mentioned Easton Cowan earlier in the episode. He's off to the OHL championship with the London Knights, and man, they got a good chance at heading back to the Memorial Cup this season, which will be in Saginaw for those who are interested. You can get your tickets at SeatGeek using code STICKSINTHE6 for $20 off your first purchase. But Fraser Minton, he's already getting that game 7 heartbreak feeling to him. Obviously, his team lost in game 7 overtime, just like the Maple Leafs did. Rough out for him, but at the same time, great season for Fraser Minton, and I truly believe these are two prospects that are ready to take the next step. And we could see, especially Fraser Minton next season. I wouldn't doubt seeing him get 9 games next season. Peter, your thoughts on those two prospects?
Yeah, that was an intense series because I think 6 of the 7 games went to overtime, and Minton had one of those game winners. I think there was a clip going online where he's just doing the whole Selly to like a really badass Selly to center ice when he scored the goal. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. But 14 points in 16 games. Unfortunately, came to an end, but you know what? Strong showing from him in the playoffs that he was able to elevate his play, or not elevate his play, be the same type of player that he is, but still have that same mentality, that physical two-way play that makes him very special and a top prospect in the system. Now, he's not going to be a top-tier performer. He's not going to be a big point producer, but he's the type of depth player that can show up in big moments and can turn the tides of a game. That's what they're lacking, and I'm really excited to see what he could do. I think maybe he starts off in the Marlies next year. He can get that 9-game tryout, considering that he had 4 this season. So he already has that NHL experience. Let's see what happens, because he could really fight for a roster spot next season. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be a fun offseason this offseason, Peter. It's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot of changes. I think it starts in the next couple days here when the Leafs management takes to the podium. Look, MLSE is trying to make some changes, and there may be no president when we kick off the 2024-25 season next year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, we'll have Alex back on next week. A little technical difficulties on his side, but on top of that, we don't have a lot of information. We don't want to share a lot of information, but there's a lot of things happening with the network. We're very excited for the network.
Yes.
Big shout out to Kyle and Dylan, who continue to push the network and push these shows and get the best that they can for guys like us who are just sitting in our basements talking hockey and shooting the shit about our favorite team. So shout out to them, and we look forward to the changes that are about to come. As always, guys, make sure you follow us on all of our socials down at the bottom right there. You can hit us up on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you download on Spotify. Amazon Prime members can get our show ad-free on Amazon Podcasts. We are also on Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and TikTok. And if you're looking to go to a game, remember, London's kicking off the OHL Championship on Thursday night. Go to SeatGeek, use code STICKSIN6 right there on the bottom. STICKSIN6 code. You get $20 off your first purchase on SeatGeek only. Also, if you're looking to customize some of your hockey gear, check out No Name Hockey. Link will be in the description of the episode as well. No Name Hockey. You can customize your stick, customize your curve, customize the shaft, customize everything about your stick. Hell, I think you can even customize the colors if you want. So check out No Name Hockey. Otherwise, that's all we got this week for episode 159. Again, it was with solemn hearts that we had to bring you this episode and talk about another Game 7 loss. But next week, episode 160, we'll be looking to get back into the vibe with the Maple Leafs and what's to come in the offseason. Until next week, for Peter and myself, that's it for Sticks in the Six.